Hey, it's Nolan here. In today's video, I'm going to be forging a chef's knife, and today I don't really have a profile planned for it, so I've heard some people call it the Bob Ross approach to knife making, where basically you just forge it, and wherever the metal goes, it's kind of what you go with. I have a slight plan on a knife that I made recently, and I'm going to try and get it pretty close to that, but honestly, we're just going to see what happens. I made this new spring fuller, so we're going to test this out today and see how it works on drawing out the tang. This is my first time using a spring fuller, so it's definitely going to be a bit of a learning curve for me. And if any of y'all have any ideas what I could do to be more efficient with it, feel free to let me know. Once I've got the material pretty well isolated, I'll bring it to the edge of my anvil and begin to draw out the tang. Just enough to get a better hold on it with my tongs for now. Now I can go ahead and start forging the tip a little bit. I'm really trying to just break in that top corner to make it one continuous curve up to the tip. When forging a blade this shape, you never want to take one part to its finished dimensions immediately. You want to kind of go back and forth between steps. Another way to say this is you want to make a preform. This will ensure that you have an easier time getting your finished shape and that you have enough material to put where you want it to go. So to do this, I forge the tip down to start, and this way when I draw the heel out and then forge the bevel, that tip will bend itself right back up. Right now, I'm using a 10-pound crossbeam hammer to try and draw out some length to my blade, which is totally unnecessary. You could do the same with like a 3 to 4-pound hammer, but this just makes me feel cool for a few minutes. After getting to the length I like, I can now start to forge the bevels, and to do this, I just take a rounding hammer and I move up and down the edge of the blade. This part usually takes a few heats, and it's really important to make sure you get a good distal taper, especially on chef's knives. That essentially means that towards the heel of your knife is the thickest part, and it gets thinner as it goes to the tip. Now that I've got it pretty much the thickness and length that I want, I can now clean up the profile. After doing so much of the other forging, it's very uneven, so I'll just use a light hammer and hit any high spots I see. This part is really fun because even the smallest hits can make a huge difference to the appearance of the knife, and you just get to play around with it until you have a shape that you're happy with. I don't really know how to explain to do it, you just kind of get the feel for it as you go, and you'll learn how the different ways you hit it move it in different ways. When I was filming this, it started to get dark really quickly, so my camera wasn't focusing as good. So I'll speed up the process a bit. The last things I had to do were finish drawing out the tang, and then after that, I get everything straightened up. As I'm straightening it, I'm hitting it so light you think I wouldn't do anything, but actually each blow makes a huge difference. If you tap it too much in one area, you can bend your knife in the opposite direction that you want it to go, and this part is really tedious but also really important. After getting the knife all finished up, I can stamp in my maker's mark and then call it good for the day. Alright, here's how the knife is looking after forging. I got it pretty much as straight as I can get it, and it was really hard with such a thin blade, but I'm going to grind in the profile next and then quench it. Usually when I'm grinding the profile, I'll use a pretty worn out belt. This way I can push pretty hard without having to worry about ruining a fresh belt. And it's also important to give yourself a good visible template to follow. Here I put down a piece of paper on my knife and I sprayed paint over it to show me where I need to grind to. The reason that's important because if you grind too much or too little, it'll be super noticeable and you'll change the entire appearance of your knife. Grinding the heel or the choil of the knife can be tricky, since you're trying to grind a small radius with a flat grinder, so you have to flip your knife over into different angles, and that allows you to be able to hit where you want to. After grinding the profile in, I realized that there's some areas that aren't perfectly straight, especially down here in the heel. It's got a really big twist to it. So I'm going to pop it back in the forge and straighten it out again, and I'm also going to put my maker's mark back in, because when I tried to do it, it was dark out, and it didn't really turn out very well, so we're going to do that again too. Alright, the knife came out much straighter this time. Both sides are looking good. Got the maker's mark put back in. Now I can go ahead and start the normalization cycles. To do the normalization cycles, I'm just putting it in and out of the forge, taking it right through the flame really slowly, trying to get a really even heat. I've never really quenched a knife that's this long or this thin before, so I'm expecting a little bit of warping, but hopefully we can keep it to a minimum. That's what the normalization cycles are for right now, and hopefully it doesn't crack. That'd be a worst case scenario, but we'll see how it goes. All right, it looks like we got a little bit of warping towards the tip, but overall not as bad as I was expecting. This should definitely be fixable in the temper. All right, we got the knife all quenched, and I tempered it for 2 hours at 400 degrees, and I actually was able to straighten the tip out in the temper. So the knife is all straight now, and this is a really big accomplishment for me. I've never been able to do such a long knife that's so thin before and keep it straight, so I'm really excited about that. Now I've just got to decide, do I want to grind the bevels, or do I want to fit up the handle? I think I'll grind the bevels, just that way if I ruin the knife while grinding the bevels somehow, I don't waste the wood for the handle, so let's do that. Here I'm switching to a brand new 36 grit belt. I've learned that it's super important to have a nice sharp belt to get even bevels. Another thing that helps me keep my bevels even is to start at a pretty steep angle until the edge meets each other in the middle. Then I can slowly move to a shallower and shallower angle as I grind. But you also want to keep your hands steady and not change your angle too often, because that'll give you several different angles to your bevel and it'll just not look right. Practice is really key here, and it took me probably 2 years to get to a point I was happy with. Right here, I'm grinding with a knife parallel to my platen, and this will make sure my blade is perfectly flat all the way down so I don't get any high or low spots as I grind. As I grind the tip thinner and thinner, it also becomes really flexible. As you can see here, it bends a lot, but it also goes back to being straight, which is a really good sign. As I'm grinding, I try to pay attention to the sparks. If they are going across my entire belt, I can know that I'm making good contact all the way across, which will help my bevels stay nice and flat and even. Grinding is one of those things I'll probably never stop improving on. If you were to look at it like levels, I'm probably just past a beginner and into like a learning stage, because there's still so many things I don't know how to do. Like just recently, I was grinding a recurve knife, and I had to reach out to a friend of mine to ask for some tips on how to do it. Alright, I got the knife to 120 grit off the belts. I'm going to go ahead and take a little break right here. I'm going to test the edge geometry to make sure it's cutting well. So I've got an apple to test this out. Nice. Not bad. So it looks like it's wedging just a little bit. That very first cut. Just a little bit hard, but that's probably because I only have it to a 600 grit finish right now. So like this won't shave hair or anything like that. It's not sharp. Just testing the edge geometry. But yeah, if I slide the knife a little bit, it's like a laser. All right, after a little bit of consideration, I might have to grind a little bit off of this tip because it got too thin. Just look how flexible this is. It's just rolling over with my finger, like not even pushing it hard at all, and it just bends right over. And it goes right back, so that's a good thing. The heat treat is really good, but it's just so thin. I don't know if that would be good for cooking. All right, I've got some really bad news. I was just sitting here grinding the tang on the knife. I was going sideways just like this, and the tang literally just snapped off. And the grain structure seems to be perfect, so I'm not sure what happened. There's no cracks, no delaminations, nothing like that. So I'm not sure what happened. I ground in this little notch to put the tang into, and I'm going to try and weld it back on. All right, I got it all set up. I'm just going to guess on the amperage, and hopefully I don't die. All right, so what I think I'm going to have to do if I want to save this knife at all is I'm going to have to cut and grind the tang into the blade. So I'll just reprofile the knife, and hopefully that'll give me something usable. All right, so after grinding it back, I got the profile all cleaned up, and I think it actually looks pretty good. So I think this knife is salvageable, and I'm gonna go ahead and start fitting up the handle. This is the piece of wood I want to use. This is a piece of walnut burl, and I think it's gonna go really nice with the dark forged scale. Typically to drill out the handle blocks, I use my drill press, but I have it all the way down right now, and this goes all the way up to the chuck. So this piece of wood is too big, so I'm gonna use a hand drill and see how it goes. I've never done this before, but hopefully it works. All right, so after like 10 million years, I finally got it fitted. The handle goes all the way in. Now I just gotta figure out how to fit the shoulder up to the block of wood, because right now this is flat and this is angled. One method I came up with is taking the tang, putting it in the handle, and I use a file guide. Then I take a file that rests on the tang and I butt it up against the handle block. And then since the file is sticking up, I can take another flat piece of something and I can set it against there. And then I'll take a pencil and I'll draw a line. Now this line will give me the perfect angle to fit up to the shoulder of my knife. All right, let's check the fit up. First try, perfect. Now there's just that gap on the sides from using the big drill bit. So to fix that, got this little Kydex space that I put on there. Now, everything's perfect, and it'll also add a little bit of extra color to it. Got the knife all fitted up now, and the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hand sand it so the blade's to its finished polish, and then I'm gonna glue it up. And tomorrow, I'll go ahead and shape the handle. All right, so I was just over here hand sanding, and it was taking me forever. And here's the side I was hand sanding. I just can't get these lines out. I went to 400 grit on the grinder, and I was doing 220 grit with sandpaper. I've been at it for like an hour and just was making no progress. So I took my orbital sander and put some 600 grit on it, and this finish looks awesome. It's almost matte, but it's still shiny. So I think I'm gonna do this and just leave it like this because this looks so cool. I'm really happy with that. So this is what I was doing. I was taking some 600 grit, just put it on my orbital sander like that. And boom, almost a flawless finish. There's a few spots that I'm gonna have to focus on a little bit more, but it's incredibly fast and it gives like this beautiful finish. So I'm really happy about that. After getting the blade to the final finish, I'm ready to go ahead and glue it up. But this is how everything fits up so far. Got the spacer and the handle. No gaps, no daylight coming through, and it's as tight as I can get it around the bolster area. All right, got the knife all glued up. Everything went really well. So now I'm gonna trace on my handle shape. Boom. Now to remove all this material I need, I'm gonna be using this really big rasp. Now this is new to me instead of using my belt grinder, but this is like super sharp and I'm able to move wood almost faster than my belt grinder with it. So I'm gonna do that, and then I'll finish contouring everything with my belt grinder. The reason I'm using a rasp is it'll save the life of my ceramic belts by a lot. Because my belt grinder isn't variable speed, wood tends to burn and then gunk it up really easily. So this just saves me a bit of money on my belts, and it doesn't affect my time at all. All in all, I think it only took 7 minutes, and that's along with setting up camera angles and stuff. All right, well I got the handle profiled, and I'm in love with this one. This is definitely one of the best chef's knives I've made so far. So next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and start shaping the handle. And I wanna do 2 facets up here, and I wanna do like kind of a sculpted palm swell back here. So I'll record that process and show y'all how I do that. When grinding my handles, before I start rounding everything over, I like to make sure everything is close to its final dimensions. So I'll sand down the front of the handle to make it much thinner at the front so it's more comfortable in a pinch grip. And then you have to be very careful the whole time that you know where your blade is, so you don't accidentally grind into it and ruin the whole thing. Then once I've got everything to the width I need, I can start grinding in my facets. This part was really tricky to me, trying to get all the lines to meet up in the same place and for them to be even. So I went really slow, just checking to make sure I wasn't grinding away too much. And after I got them all put in, I went ahead and began to grind in the palm swell. To do this, I used the small wheel on my grinder and used that to give me that really nice rounded finish. Now that I'm done with the belt grinder, I'm going to use some files, and this will help me really dial in that palm swell, because I want to have a pretty sharp angle going through here that really defines that, because having those nice sharp lines, I think, really stands out. Now that I've finished filing it, I can start hand sanding. I'm going to start with some 400 grit. I'm going to use something with a flat backer so that I can keep the facets nice and sharp. Look at the top right here. It's like a feather. See all those little stripes going every which way. I can't wait to see this all finished up. I'm only at like 800 grit right now, and this wood is already like literally glowing. I am so excited to see it like when it's finished. It is crazy. Now that I'm past 800 grit, I like to sand with a little bit of oil. I've noticed that with walnut wood, if I sand it all the way to its final finish without oiling it, and then once I'm done sanding and then I oil it, it becomes almost matte and it like loses all its luster. So with sanding with it oiled, it helps to keep that shininess and overall just gives it a much nicer finish, I found. So I've added this into my process whenever I sand my walnut handles now. Check this out. I am so happy with that. That wood is absolutely beautiful. The very last thing I have to do on this knife is sharpen it, so here we go. To sharpen this knife, I'm going to be using my whetstones. I start with 1000 grit stone to set in my angle, and then I'll spend most of my time on this one to ensure that I get the apex all the way to the edge. And then I'll make sure it's nice and thin and even. After 1000 grit, I'll move on to 6000 to polish the edge and continue to refine it. Right off the 1000 grit stone, if you do good enough, you should be able to shave hair. So all the 6000 is really doing is making it finer so that it gives it an even smoother cutting edge. After getting it to a place I was happy with, I gave it a good strop and then it was complete. This knife had its obstacles for sure, but it was really fun to make. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the whole process, and I really appreciate you being here. God bless.